Hello, and thank you for joining us today as we present a webinar on the virtual apps and desktops in the Citrix Workspace environment. This webinar is brought to you by Layer 8 Training, and my name is David Dart. I'm a Citrix certified instructor working with Layer 8 Training. Layer 8 is a Citrix Authorized Learning Center. It's one of the largest Citrix Authorized Learning partners in North America, and we've been awarded the Calc of the Year award for the last 4 years running. On staff, we currently have 5 CCIs, including 4 Master CCIs, which is an invitation-only program for CCIs that have demonstrated exceptional training capabilities. We have one of the largest guaranteed to run Citrix schedule in North America. And in addition to Citrix products, we also train in Checkpoint, Nutanix, Palo Alto, as well as additional products on the system. Myself, I'm a Master CCI. I've been working with the Citrix product for over 10 years and with Layer 8 for 8 years now. And I've been a technical trainer for 20 plus years, training in everything from Citrix, Checkpoint, Cisco, and Microsoft products on the system. So in today's webinar, we're going to discuss implementing a virtual apps and desktop environment for remote workers. And we'll discuss some of the options that are available to us, including machine creation services, Citrix Provisioning, utilizing app layering to create your master images. We'll look at configuring the user's configuration using an Active Directory GPO or utilizing Citrix Studio Policies. We'll also take a quick look at the implementation of a workspace environment management, an alternative to many of the policies that would be applied via Citrix Studio or GPOs on the system. And finally, we'll look at transitioning your Citrix infrastructure into the cloud by utilizing the Citrix Cloud component in the system. So let's get going. So the first thing we're going to look at is implementing the virtual apps and desktops. So a quick definition of what the virtual apps environment is would be a good point to start. In this case, we're looking at users coming in from any device, whether that device is a laptop, a desktop, a tablet, or a cell phone. It doesn't matter. We're looking at any device coming into our internal environment from home or potentially working within the office and connecting up to the various resources that we have available to us. So we can give our users applications, such as Microsoft Office, Epic, whatever application you may need to provide to your users, and keep the management and installation of that application centralized inside of your network center. We can also provide our users with desktops, either a private desktop or a shared desktop, basically looking at a client VDI, Windows 8, Windows 10, or a server desktop running on 2016, 2019 on the system. Additionally, the Citrix environment allows you to deploy out Linux desktops as well. So these are some additional options for providing our users with resources. This way you can manage the resources centrally, as well as ensuring that your users get a positive experience, because we can provide more resources to those applications and desktops inside of our network that the user may not have when they're working from home on the system. So one of the options you have, though, is to use what's called the Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktop Service. Historically, the Citrix environment was deployed within a business deployment, either on physical boxes or utilizing a hypervisor to deploy out your servers and or your desktops. Recent years has seen a transition to where many of the resources are deployed in a cloud environment. So you might see an Azure environment, an AWS environment, where you forklift your entire deployment into that particular environment. Another option we have is to do a mixture and use the Virtual Apps and Desktop Service, which allows you to put your Citrix infrastructure your delivery controllers, your storefront, gateways, license server, and SQL Server into the Citrix Cloud and allows Citrix to maintain all of those particular machines in your system. This takes the onus of that responsibility off of you. And so you can focus on your resources, i.e. your published resources and or your desktops. So all you're responsible for is what's maintained inside of your network center. Now, alternatively, you could also have your resources deployed in the cloud. So that does give us an option on the system to deploy these inside of the cloud as well. So whether you're deciding whether or not you want to use the virtual apps and desktops on-premise, or you want to use the virtual apps and desktop service inside of the Citrix Cloud, we have to create the systems that are providing the resources out to our users, whether those systems are desktops or applications. And we have a number of ways of doing it. One way would be to use existing systems and bring those in. Another would be to use the tools that Citrix provides us to create these machines utilizing a master image. One of these is using machine creation services. Machine creation services is a built-in service. It's integral to your delivery controllers that allows you to deploy out your virtual machines from a single master image. This doesn't require any additional licensing. It's going to lower your administrative overhead in that it is relatively straightforward to train somebody on how to do this. And it makes it easier for updating. This is a storage-based delivery and fully supported in the cloud. So when you're looking at your environment here, you can choose to create your catalogs or your machines utilizing your systems in the your system here. So for instance, we could create a machine catalog on the system utilizing Citrix Studio. And if we take a look, you have a master image that you create. So in this case, we have a master system. And then we use the catalog to connect up and duplicate that master image multiple times. In this case, I have some servers here. And if we look at the storage, you'll see that the storage has a base disk, which is pulling from the master image, and an identity disk, and some temporary storage on the system. So we can use the MCS component to create our systems for easy deployment within our environment. Very useful, easy to utilize it within the system. Another option we've got, and this takes a little bit more in the way of configurations, is to use provisioning services, or the Citrix Provisioning now. With the Citrix Provisioning, you create your images using an additional deployment within your system, Citrix Provisioning, and we create a streamed setup within the environment. So in this case, we're looking at using streaming-based technology, where the image that the users are connecting up to may or may not have a hard drive on the system. So we may just stream this out to the systems across the network from a single image called a vDisk, virtual disk. And this is then going to be streamed out across the network. So this obviously is going to be network-based. This gives us the ability to have some consistency when we're dealing with the environment. So we have consistency on the images that the users use. We also have centralized control and management. So when you're looking at updating your system, it's relatively straightforward on the system. So since this is going to be network-based, this can help reduce your storage costs that you would see on utilizing the MCS component in your environment there. And the ease of updating is one of the things about Citrix Provisioning that makes it one of my favorites and my preferred methods of deploying out our systems. Now, one of the options you have when you're using either machine creation services or using Citrix Provisioning is where do you get the master image that these systems are going to be used to create your system. Historically, it's not uncommon for an administrator to come into the system and create a master image. So they'll come in, create a master image, power that image on, install the operating system, hypervisor tools, the virtual delivery agent, join the domain, and then install any applications that you want to give out to your users. So that's a common way of doing it for a very, very long time. Another option we have when we're looking at this is to create that master image using what's called the application layering option. So this is the Citrix application layering or app layering. With this one, we layer the various components that make up our operating system. So rather than create a single storage medium with, say, just the operating system on it, we create multiple storage mediums and virtual disks, and we install the operating system on one layer. We create a platform layer for the platform-specific components, hypervisor tools, domain join, and additional tools. And then you create one or more application layers that contain applications. And you can create hundreds of these. We also have the ability to create what are called elastic layers. Elastic layers allow you to create a catalog of VMs and deliver them to the users without the applications installed on that system, and instead assign it to users, so that when users log on to a virtual box, the elastic layer would then be elastically assigned to them and then incorporated into their hard drive. So you could have two users assigned to the same virtual machine, but they would see different components when they actually log on to the box on your system. So the app layering component is an additional infrastructure. So this does require you to have some additional components. One of them is going to be your ELM. This is the app layering master tool that'll have several drives that are going to be used for storage of virtual hard drives. And you will then log on to the system utilizing a tool here. Let's get to the right one here. You log on to your Citrix Layering Manager and you create layers. So in this case, I've created a layer for my operating system. So I have a 2016 operating system. I then create a platform layer to go along with that operating system layer for different hypervisors. And then I create one or more application layers. In this case, I have a single application layer on the system. So I can use this to mix and match and create what are called templates. So I can create a template here, and different templates can have different layers assigned to it. And then when I'm ready, I publish this layer out, and this creates a master machine for us. Now, if you're doing MCS, the master machine that's created will be created on the hypervisor that you've selected. If you publish the layered image using PVS, it'll go directly into the PVS store where the system is storing the virtual images. So it'll convert it right to that on the system. So that can minimize the amount of work that you have to do. So app layering is a nice way when you're in an enterprise environment and you're looking at multiple images with different systems. So you may have different hypervisors, different domains. This way you can create a single operating system layer, single application layer. The only thing that would be different between different systems would be the platform layer. So this can minimize the amount of work that you have to do by utilizing these various layers on the system. Then when you want to upgrade your systems, you come in and you upgrade your systems. So I could have an operating system that was designed for MCS, another one that's designed for Windows 10. And then we have different platform layers that we can come in, bring into the system to make our lives just a little bit easier. And then once we're done, we've created an image, and you have one or more images assigned to that particular component for deployment out into your environment. This can facilitate the updating process, because when we need to update the operating system, we just go back to the operating system layer, update the operating system. If I need to upgrade the application layer, I just upgrade the application layer. And this will not impact other layers on the system. So whatever method you choose, you're going to ultimately be creating your images for your desktops and or your servers hosting applications. Once you have the resources provided out to your users, we then look at creating the user experience. So we look at how do we deploy out the system so that the users get the best experience possible. For this, we use primarily policies. So when you're controlling the user experience, we can utilize the studio policies to define exactly what we want the users to see, i.e. how long can their session remain active on the system, what type of printers are they going to have on the system, etc. So by utilizing the Citrix Studio policy, this provides us with a single pane of access in our environment. Let's see if this guy's going to pop in here for some reason. So he gives us a single pane for providing us with the policies that we want to use. So I can create a policy right here without having to go into any other console. One of the limitations to using the Citrix Studio policy node is that the policies are going to be stored inside your site database, and they will be only applicable to the site that database covers on the system. Also, another slight issue, the Studio policies are not directly migratable into the Citrix Cloud. We can convert them to a GPO and migrate them. However, if you're going to the cloud and you want to continue using Citrix Studio policies, you're going to have to manually transition them over on your system. So that's something to keep in mind. If you're interested in using or continuing to utilize GPOs, we do have the option of using group policy objects. So this is going to provide us with the same experience that we've used in the environment for many, many years when configuring policies. We have our user policies, we have our computer policies. The policies, however, are no longer stored inside of the site database. They're going to be stored inside of the Active Directory sysvol, which gives us the ability to utilize the high availability of having multiple domain controllers is going to give us on the system. This provides us with high availability, as well as we have a wider scope for where this is going to be applicable. And a benefit to this is if you're using the GPO option, you do not need to worry about migrating these into the Citrix Cloud. You just attach the policies to the OU that you're interested in using, and you're done. So if you're using Studio policies, one path you could use when you're migrating to the Citrix Cloud would be to convert all of your Studio policies to a GPO, then attach in the appropriate OU, and you're done on the system. So it gives you some options there. Another option that we have for many of the policies, both either GPO or Citrix policies, is to use a tool called Workspace Environment Management. This is a software solution that allows you to control resource management as well as user environment components in your system. So utilizing the Workspace Environment Management, we have the ability to deploy out printers, determine what applications users have, set optimization for the machine that the user is logging onto, as well as replacing the Windows roaming policy or the Citrix profile management. So in this case, when we're looking at the Workspace Environment Management, let's close my cloud out there, we have a tool that has its own database. And within this tool, we have the ability to come in and define what applications a user will see when they log on to a virtual machine. We can look at the application list. We can show their start menu programs. We can assign out printers on your system, network drives, virtual drives. So it gives us some options to provide these out to the users. We also have the ability to optimize the system. So how is the system going to be working? So when they're on a server or they're on a client system, how do you want to handle the CPUs? So do you want to implement what's called spike protection, so that when applications spike, we can throttle components. We can look at CPU priority, so we can enable process priority and give different processes on your system higher priority to CPU access. CPU affinity, as well as CPU clamping, so we can do some process clamping on the system. We have tools for optimizing memory usage on our virtual machines, so we can set some working set optimizations. I/O management, fast log off. Fast log off is a nice utility for logging users off immediately from their virtual machine. So when the user is working, they log off. The enable fast log off will, from the user's perspective, immediately log them off of their virtual machine, and they're done, they walk away. While in the background, the process to continue the log off until it's complete happens. So the user, for them, it's a very, very fast log off. We have a Citrix optimizer, so we can optimize our machines for various operating systems, a new feature in the WIM. We also have the ability to replace some of the policies on our system. So with the policies, we're looking at some Windows policies as well as some Citrix policies. And we can process environmental settings for the Windows. So are you going to be hiding common programs, hide administrative tools, lock their taskbar, set a specific theme for their desktop, visual styles, their wallpaper? Do you want to display or not display certain components on their desktop? So you can hide the recycle bin, hide the My Computer. What will they see in Windows Explorer? So we can prevent access to the registry tools. What can they see within the control panel? So these are things that you can normally set inside of a GPO. Well, we set it here, and we'll explain why this is going to be a benefit to you in just a moment. We've also got the ability to set the Microsoft user state virtualization option. These are Windows roaming profile. So with this, we can process Windows roaming profile settings, so we can set their roaming profile path. They're on the system, so where are the profile settings, where's the home drive. We can set folder exclusions and folder redirection here. So we can come in and we can do redirect our desktop, etc. So we have some options. So rather than using a GPO to do this, we use it here. And then the Citrix Profile Management, this replaces the UPM, the user profile management that the Citrix environment has available to us in the Virtual Apps and Desktop 7X environment. So we can enable profile management and profile handling on the system and do the same thing we do here, do it, I should say, inside of Studio Policy. We do it right here. But this now, it's a click. It's a point and click, turn it on. So we don't need to go into all the various policies and turn these on the system. We also have some security options here when we're looking at our environment here. So we have some security options that we can utilize. And in particular, we have this process management, which is a very useful tool, especially when you're dealing with a server virtual desktop. One of the characteristics of a server virtual desktop is that when the user gets to the desktop, any application that's installed on that desktop, they'll have access to. But that may not be what you want. So rather than creating multiple server images, we can create a single server image and then enable process management. We can then enable a blacklist, where we blacklist certain applications. So if you don't want users to get to, say, Mozilla or Chrome, we can blacklist that application or applications on the system. We can exclude local administrators if we need to. Or we can do a process whitelist. Now, a blacklist is telling the system which applications the users cannot use. You can use one or the other, but not both. So if I do a whitelist, I have to tell the system exactly what applications the user can use versus telling the system what the user can't use. Now, these are exclusive. So if I select the whitelist, the process blacklist is grayed out and I cannot select it. So why would you use Workspace Environment Management? Well, the Workspace Environment Management is going to utilize an environment where the system will push out all of these settings when the machine boots up, and periodically will be refreshed from a database. There's going to be what's called a WIM agent installed on the systems that will periodically pull everything down. So all of these settings that you do are going to be on the system before the user ever logs in. Once they log in, it's already there. So if we're using profile management, the settings are there. We don't need to pull those across the network. So it's already going to be there. So this can minimize the amount of time it takes for your system to boot up. And benchmarks can show you a 75% improvement in the logon time. So it gives us an additional way of configuring the environment for our users in the system. The third and last thing we're going to talk about is some of the options you have for deploying all these tools out. One of them would be to do everything on-prem on the system. So this is the WIM I just talked about. One of these would be to do your environment with everything on-prem. So you've got a network, and this is the way a lot of companies have been using it for years, and they're still using it. So you do the entire thing on-prem, your users are within your office, your access layer, vis-a-vis storefront, gateway, your control layer, your delivery control. These are all built into your network. All of your VDA systems, i.e. your resources, are inside of your network. We could use a service provider, so you could pay somebody else to do it. So the only thing that you'd have in your system would be your users with the Workspace app or Citrix receiver installed on their box. We could do a cloud hosted. Now, be sure that you can differentiate between cloud hosted and Citrix Cloud hosted. In a cloud hosted environment, you're using Azure, AWS, Google components to replace your network deployment and hypervisor deployments on site. The only thing that might remain on site would be your endpoint devices or a hybrid. Cloud host, if you take your entire infrastructure, your delivery controller, your SQL server, your domain controller, if you put everything into the cloud, that's called a forklifted model. So that's an option. We also have the ability to do the Citrix Cloud hosted. Now with the Citrix Cloud hosted, we're looking at taking the Citrix infrastructure and putting those into the cloud. All of your resource components will remain on premise or in an Azure or AWS environment. You will always be responsible for the resources in your environment. What we do with this though is we take the control layer that is currently deployed on premise, and this would include your delivery controllers, your license server, your SQL server, potentially your storefront server, and your Citrix ADC gateway. And we put those into the Citrix Cloud. The benefit to this is multifold. One, you no longer have to worry about deploying these, maintaining high availability, and or doing the updates. All of this will be handled by Citrix. So it makes it very, very straightforward to utilize this. The only thing you would have to keep at your site would be your VDAs and a device called the Cloud Connector. This is going to be a proxy that connects up to the delivery controller. So this minimizes the amount of work you have to do with your on-prem and puts everything into the Citrix side. So this keeps everything in what's called evergreen. So you always have the latest versions available to you. Storefront and your Citrix gateway component, these are optional. You can leave these on premise or you can put them in the cloud. And there are some decisions to make when you're looking at deploying these. Now, when you're making that decision, do I want to go to the cloud? Do I want to stay on-prem? There are some questions you have to ask. How is it done? How is it managed, etc. One of the very nice benefits of using the cloud is, from a management perspective, just about everything is the same. When we're looking at an on-prem environment, when you look at your virtual when you look at your Citrix Studio, we do everything here. We create our catalogs, we create our delivery groups, our applications. So we put everything into the system here, and we can create our machine catalogs. You just right-click, select, I want to create a machine catalog. We have our logging, so we have all of our logging that's in the system. We have our configuration for our administrators, etc. Everything is done right here, and this is what people have been utilizing for a very long time. When we're looking at the cloud, though, it's almost identical. We have the Citrix Cloud Studio, and it has the same components here that we have in an on-premise studio. You create machine catalogs almost identically. The only difference between creating a machine catalog here and on-prem is you have to provide the computer, the domain credentials that can create the machines. Since these are in the cloud, the systems in the cloud are not part of your domain, so you still need to provide those domain credentials on the system. So creating catalogs are the same. Creating your delivery groups are the same, with a few slight differences for how you're going to publish your applications and resources in the system. Policies, you can create your policies using the Citrix Studio policies here. The one limitation, though, is you cannot import the templates. So when you're looking at deploying templates, you don't have the option to import. So if you're going to use your studio policies from your on-site, you're going to need to manually recreate them in the system here. So just about everything is exactly the same. When we're looking at deploying out the, say, director, so director is still the same. So when you're looking at your Citrix tools, when you go to log on to director on-prem, we have pretty much the same thing here. So let's log on to an on-prem director here. And when you log on to director on-prem, you have your standard consoles, you have your dashboards, your trends, your alerts. You have everything that has been brought into the system for you to monitor your environment. So it's going to give you that option if it comes up here. When we look at the cloud, we have the same thing. We have a monitoring option, and the monitoring option inside of the cloud is going to give us the exact same thing we see inside of the on-prem, with a few exceptions. For instance, you will no longer see licensing. Licensing is no longer something you need to worry about monitoring. It's done by Citrix. Also, when you're looking at trends, you're not going to see a network tab for your trends on the system. That's because we don't implement the MOS or ADM within the environment. See, this guy's coming in here. I'm not coming in here today yet. So just about everything is going to be exactly the same. So the transition from one to the next is not that strenuous or difficult. So it can make your life a little bit easier. Additionally, when you're looking at the Citrix Cloud, we have a whole host of additional services that we can rapidly deploy in the environment. We can deploy out Workspace Environment Management just by subscribing to it. We then just go in and make our configuration settings. We can bring in Citrix Analytics, which is a very nice tool for viewing user activity as it relates to web access. We've got an ADM, content collaboration, the updated name for ShareFile, endpoint management, the updated name for is in mobile. We've got micro apps, SD-WAN orchestrator, secure browser. We've got, so we have a number of options on the system for the Citrix Cloud. So if you're looking at migrating over to that system, this may be something that you'd be interested in looking into. So the deployment here is very straightforward. It can make your life a little bit easier. And so you'll see the differences between on-premise studio and the cloud studio on the system, as well as the on-premise director versus the cloud director. Minor differences between these systems. So I want to thank you for attending this webinar or viewing this webinar, if you're downloading it. If you have any additional questions on the Citrix line of products, feel free to contact Layer 8 Training at layer8training.com or for the website, or going and sending an email to info@layer8training.com to get information on the full range of classes that are available. Thank you for joining. My name is David Dart, and have a great weekend.